So I'm going to get started straight into it. I'm going to ask Tom to speak first because Tom is also the chairperson, aren't you, of the NCC, which is the National Cannabis Coalition. Have I got the order right this time? Yeah. Yeah, and that's basically an umbrella group for the UK of all the other cannabis groups, and all the other cannabis groups have somebody on the board, and he's the actual chair of it. So we're going to hear from some of Tom's wisdom on cannabis.
Yes. I myself don't consume cannabis, but I got this dodgy knee. The surgeon took some cartilage out. I mean, I wasn't held down. I didn't agree to the procedure, but it means it's a little bit dodgy. And I reckon that as I get older, I'll be looking for something to relieve the pain. And I won't want to be putting opiates and the like into my system. So I dare say I'll become a user of consumer of cannabis for medicinal purposes in the future. And I just hope that the law gets changed before my knee gets to that point. As Sarah said, I'm Tom Lyyod. I'm a former chief constable with just over 30 years policing experience in this country. And since then I've been lucky enough to travel to Latin America, North America, the Far East and many countries in Europe. And from my own experience of policing in the UK, and my experience talking to police officers and politicians and the people in all those various countries, I've come to the very firm conclusion that drug prohibition is a hugely costly, counterproductive and harmful failure. Now, to unpick all of that would take longer than I've got, but I did want to deal with a slightly broader issue than cannabis today. By the way, marijuana and cannabis means the same thing. Marijuana is the term normally used in Latin America and America. It's what Spanish-speaking people use, but it's exactly the same thing as cannabis. But before I go any further, could I ask those of you who consider yourselves to be drug law reform activists, would you put your hands up? So we have thanks, because we've got quite a number who aren't. And maybe, and I don't want to underestimate your knowledge of this topic, but it's really good to see you here, because whilst it's important that those who are in the activism keep contact with each other and up to date with what's happening, it's really important also that as a drug law reform movement, we try and engage with as many people as possible that we haven't spoken to before. Because what we're fighting against is over 40 years. The Misuse of Drugs Act was passed in 1971, and I know that there was legislation before that attempting to control access to various substances, often based on racism, economic considerations. I don't know if anybody's come across a name called Harry Anslinger. He was in the US. He's the kind of bogeyman of all of this. And he drove one of the best blues singers in ever to her death by persecuting her mercilessly. Johan Harry is a journalist who wrote a book called Chasing the Scream. And if you want to read something about the harm, and I mentioned the harm of constant prohibition, something about the harm that prohibition does, read that book. It's quite shocking. And certainly as a police officer, I've seen so many shocking things which at face value look as though they are the consequences of drug consumption, but are actually the consequences of drug prohibition. But so more broadly, prohibition fails because it takes a substance that people want to use, and it prevents them from using it, and thereby creates an illicit market. And all illicit markets, this is just a rule of economics, they have costs, not necessarily heavy financial costs, but they have costs in terms of avoiding law enforcement. So basically the price goes up. So we have cannabis literally worth its weight in gold, simply because politicians decided that they would try and ban its production, supply and use. So what that has done, and this pains me as a former police officer, and I think it should pain every single citizen in this country, that has created a massive criminal market. So it's estimated that that up to $500 billion a year worldwide is the size of this illicit market. And what that enables criminals to do is to buy the weaponry, literally to outgun the forces of law and order, but also to corrupt. And most corruption in policing comes from people being tempted by the money in the drugs market. If you kick a low-level dealer's door down, and you might well be a detective sergeant doing that, you come across a stash of thousands of pounds. And if you are tempted by that, and some sadly are, it's in the criminal's interest to let you have as much money as possible, or even some of the drugs. So that's one of the harmful natures of drug prohibition. And certainly, as a former police officer, I've seen the huge waste that is involved in policing activity. Not just in terms of the money that is spent and the time that is spent by police officers. I tweeted this morning, if you are interested in following me on Twitter, I'm at Tom C. Lyyod, that's L-O-Y-D, that there was a big operation in Northamptonshire arresting 65 drug users. Sorry, I beg your pardon, drug dealers or people involved in drugs. And I tweeted basically that it would have a negligible effect on the drugs market, and it will have a massive effect on the police's ability to do what the public really wants, which is to protect them from assault, from theft, from disorder, from disorderly conduct, and all the things that actually worry most people in their lives, rather than trying and failing to combat an illicit drug market that history has shown us over the last 40 to 50 years has been one of the most successful businesses of all time. The money is so great that every time I used to, and former colleagues now arrest a drug dealer, they simply create an opportunity for somebody else to step into that market and make money. And this is, in a sense you may know this, but I think this is the side of the story that doesn't get told. What you read in your local newspaper, or you hear on the television, is a police officer getting up and saying, this raid on these drug dealers who've been sent to prison for 15 years, 8 years, 20 years, whatever, shows we will not tolerate drugs in York. We will not tolerate drugs in Sheffield or Cambridge or London. That's clearly nonsense, because it happens time and time again. And certainly there are people here who will, as it were, remember the start of the so-called war on drugs, and I'll come back to that. And they will know that they've read those headlines week after week, after year, after decade, as we have simply failed through law enforcement to do it. So if you're failing to do something, then you really ought to stop banging your head against that wall and start thinking of doing something different. And I suppose in a nutshell, that's where my reasoning comes from experiencing every police officer, I've retired as chief constable, every police officer starts on the beat. So I was on the beat and I've moved through every rank and I've seen it from every level. And so that's why I've come to this conclusion. Everything I said there applies not just to cannabis, it applies to every drug, because all drugs are more dangerous if criminals, ruthless criminals, are in charge of their production and supply. And we can see that from the contamination. We can see that from the tragic avoidable deaths, more than 1,000 a year. Why do people die in public laboratories? They die in public laboratories because they're really scared of the police, not of being arrested, but having their drugs taken away from them. So they'll go to the public laboratory. Why? Because there's a water supply, and that's needed for injecting heroin. So they go in there, they don't know what the strength is, they inject themselves and they die. And tragically, that's what happens. In a place like, Vancouver, there's a place called Insight. How am I doing for time, by the way? I've got no idea. Okay. There's a place called Insight. Now, you would have heard of so-called shooting galleries. Well, this is actually It is a drug consumption facility, a safe injecting site, and it's called Inside. And it was set up, and you can read about this in Johan Harry's book, but it was set up to provide a place for drug consumers who were dying in the streets of Vancouver. And since it was set up over 10 years ago, nearly probably 15 years ago now, time moves on, nobody has died. But what has happened, and I know people say, oh well, I don't want that in my neighbourhood. But what happened is that people who came into the community, into that centre, had access, I think literally on the first floor, to the potential for counselling. So somebody could actually talk to them about the issues. One of the things that I need to explain about my thinking as well is that we often hear talk of about a war on drugs. And it's not a war on drugs, it's a war on people. You can't have a war on drugs. It's like having a war on a table. Drugs are inanimate objects. Politicians love to wage wars on things, but you would have thought they'd like to win them. Most of the ones they pick are the war on terror. That's another issue. But the war on drugs is the war on people. And what's really annoyed me, and continues to annoy me, and unless you vote in the Liberal Democrats or the Green Party, or both, as a coalition on Thursday, we will continue this war on people. Poor Ed Miliband, he doesn't know how to deal with this, because I think he's probably a decent bloke. And I want to get I'm not party political in this. I want all parties to change, and some are, thanks to the Lib Dems and the Greens. But he was asked a question, actually, by one of UPA's members on television, and he said, she said, so you think drugs are illegal? Well, it's not drugs that are illegal, but it's the possession of drugs is illegal. Yes. And I said, do you think it should stay that way? Yes. So if your child was arrested, the question was, if you found your child with drugs, they would have committed an offence, and presumably you tell the police. Oh dear, that's a bit of a hard one. But that's the point. If your child was arrested, would you want them given support and treatment and guidance, or would you want them prosecuted and get a conviction for the rest of their lives? Well, I know what the answer is for me. If that's for me, that's the same for everybody else. And the other really pernicious thing about this war on people, as we should refer to it, is that it victimises the most vulnerable. Those at the top end of the market buy their way out or shoot their way out. And they can live a very comfortable lifestyle, and pretty much at the top end, people get away with it. You do hear of arrests at the very top end, but it's pretty rare, frankly. The people who get arrested, and this is true of my experience all through Latin America, where we worry about the poverty gap in this country. In places like Latin America, the pyramid there's a tiny number of people who have all the wealth. I mean, I know that's an issue in this country for many people, but it's even worse there. And there's this large population who are simply abused on a daily basis by the forces of law and order. That happens in this country as well. We have a massive imbalance in the number of black people who are stopped in the street, and there's proper research backing this up, stopped in the street and arrested and convicted, which is vastly out of proportion to the number who actually consume drugs. And that's the same in America. The rate of imprisonment for black people in America is higher than it was for black people under apartheid in South Africa. The United States has 5% of the world's population, and it has 25% of the world's prisons. So, and remember, drug consumption hasn't gone down, in fact it's gone up over that period. In this country we've got similar issues, because even though not that many people go to prison simply for drug consumption, but they do go to prison because they are ostracised, neglected, abused, and criminalised for other activities. which they're forced into, and I studied philosophy, so I understand the concept of free will, but if you are a serious problematic drug user, it is very difficult to exercise that free will, particularly, and this is where I want to make another point, if what you're actually battling with is your history. It's a very sad statistic that a very substantial number of people that remember that the police victimise for consuming drugs are actually battling with sexual abuse of children, emotional abuse, physical abuse, mental conditions for whatever reason. And it's quite astonishing. And I don't say in 2015, it's astonishing at any time that a country that wants to call itself civilised says, we have a law so that these people, when out of desperation they prostitute themselves, when out of desperation they burgle, they rob. I know they rob their own grannies, but they do it because they're in such a desperate state. And I'm not trying to excuse those sorts of acts, but I cannot excuse our reaction to those desperately sad people who, of course, have access. We don't spend our money on supporting those people. Maybe some of these issues arise in adolescence or they manifest themselves later in life. We know this about child sexual abuse, but it's often much later that these things manifest themselves. And instead of spending our money on supporting those people, we spend it on punishing them. Now, there's a great deal more that I could say, but you'd probably like me to finish about it, wouldn't you? And so, if you like, that gives you an understanding that I joined the police, in a nutshell, to help people and catch criminals. And looking back on my career, every time I did something which related to enforcing the Misuse of Drugs Act, I was neither helping anybody, nor was I really catching criminals. There's a way of looking at the laws of this land. One is, let's have laws to stop people harming other people through assault of various types, or from stealing their property. And that makes sense, and you think those are laws are sensible ones. The other types of laws are those where you seek to ban or outlaw a certain type of behaviour of which you don't approve. In this country, in some ways, we're enlightened. But it's only very recently that, for example, homosexuality has not been a crime. It's still a crime in Uganda. Try being homosexual in Russia today. You know. So in some ways we're quite advanced. We also don't have religious persecution. Catholics are allowed, they weren't under Henry VIII, there was a great anti-papist, so that was perhaps more political than religious, but we're very tolerant in that regard. If somebody, literally in their own home, wants to grow a small green plant and then consume its product, either for medicinal purposes, which is perfect, or to relax, in order to listen to music, to enhance their spirituality, we'll lock them up. Well, that's just not the way for a civilised society to operate. Which is why I, as an individual, spend my time, and if you are a taxpayer, thank you, because you're paying for my pension, which puts the petrol in my car, which enables me to drive here, so thanks for that. And in the National Cannabis Coalition, which is very new, all of the various different activists will carry on doing their things in different ways, because that's in the nature of this, you want a plurality of those. But what I intend and hope is that we will be able to obtain some funding, and we will be able to get that message, which is not, I don't think you've ever heard me once actually advocate taking drugs. So now, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying if you want to, why should we employ the police to harass you and victimise you? And so, what I want to do is get that message as broadly accepted and understood as possible in the sort of people who are going to say to their politicians, the Lib Dems are listening, the Greens are listening, say to their politicians, if nothing else, and I'm kind of emphasising on this because we're about to vote on Thursday, if nothing else, if you support drug law reform, or a royal commission, or at least a start of a process of engaging in change, and acknowledging that it isn't working, then at least as a politician you won't lose out, you won't lose any votes. But hopefully we'll move forward, and as a politician you'll positively gain votes if you get up in public and say, what is happening now is wrong, we must change it. I'm not quite sure what the future might look like, I've got an idea what it might look like, but in either case we cannot tolerate this dreadful waste of money, resources, human lives. So, as a favourite radio broadcaster of mine many years ago said, if you're happy, thanks for listening. Yeah, of course you can. Sorry, I should have said that.
No, in all years you've been a police officer, on average, how many times have you arrested people through alcohol-related accidents, violence?
It's by
Compared
far.
to
Look, I've been asked this, and I've said this publicly. I would prefer, now York, what's today? It's Tuesday night, isn't it? So maybe York isn't too bad on Tuesday night. But I'll tell you what, if we had people switching from alcohol to cannabis and ecstasy, you'd halve your shifts. You wouldn't have any work left as a police officer, which would be great, because then you go on and do other things. You know, you catch the burglars at work, and you catch, you know, the robbers and the rape and all of that sort of stuff. Alcohol is a massive, massive problem in this society. But imagine, the Americans tried to ban it, didn't they? And that's maybe you can't do that. One of the huge drivers of drug consumption. Law enforcement is irrelevant. The Home Office eventually, the Liberal Democrat persuaded Theresa May to publish this report. The report looked at about 20 different countries. Law enforcement doesn't matter. You have strong law enforcement, high drug use, strong law enforcement, low drug use, low enforcement, high and low. It doesn't make a difference because there are other societal factors. One of the big ones is actually poverty disparity. That seems to be a really big indicator. And frankly, if you've got people who don't see much hope in their lives, frankly, they're not probably going to sit down at the end of a working day because they haven't got a job, like I might do, and have a gin and tonic or a glass of wine. They're going to smoke some dope. And the dope they're going to smoke is the one that the criminal market provides. And the criminal market provides so-called skunk cannabis, high THC, low CBD, because it's more profitable. And that's what we're... Okay, somebody's put his head in their hands there.
It's just, you're completely wrong.
Well, I know there's...
Just so you know, I'm the criminal you're talking about, and we're doing all of it. In Britain,
Look, can I say that I know an awful lot of producers and sellers of drugs know exactly what they're doing, but an awful lot of them don't. But whatever happens is a completely unregulated market. And that, to me, makes it an unsafe market. And of course, access to children. Children have access. As much as they want, because the criminals, they're only looking at the money you've got, they're looking at your passport for your age. I really want to stop from that. And okay, well maybe you had a chance to correct what I've said there. But yeah, okay. Yeah. I mean, it's well, exactly, and I don't know everything about it, that's for sure. It's funny that, because that's the only time I've really been called up on that, so I'm assuming a lot of people agree with us.
yeah, well, I mean, you couldn't know where to test it, and I mean, the samples that you're actually testing correctly to come up with this suddenly cannabis is much more powerful than it was 30 years ago. It's preposterous. Growers would get got better because they had to hide underground and learn how to do it to get the maximum production out for the highest yield of oil.
That's
to supply for the people who actually need it on medical grounds. But from the position you're taking, anyone in the UK is breaking the law. Well, you should know as a constable what the law is. No loss, no harm, no deception, no breach of the peace. You're enforcing an act and a statute which has no grounding on any person's act.
Push to privatise water in poorer countries where you actually had to have a key, you had to pay for the key to access the water.
I can prove that a minimum of 60% of everybody's wages on this planet is paying interest to the banks.
Scientists are saying, no, man, if we don't turn this around in 5 years, we are going to reach the point of no return.
No, it's like I can still remember being a kid, and I can remember what it was like living that life of bullshit.
And whatever we can do to change that, whatever we can do to form groups, whatever we can do within ourselves to make small changes, is a step forward.
A lot of people are hanging around this system and try to fix this system. But what I would suggest is fixing this system or even another system is like giving painkiller to a dead.
We're divergent, we're different, and we can think outside the box.